Well, the initial kind of impetus for the Geography of Hope was that I was doing a lot of research and some writing on climate change, and started looking for a way to talk about climate change that was not kind of incredibly depressing and bleak and gloomy, and sort of decided, well, what if you kind of stood the problem on its head and said, okay, we know what isn't working and what's causing the problem. Are there solutions that are actually workable now and that are up and running? Because I tend to emphasize, here's what works and here's why we should be doing it. Public space is a great place to begin that conversation, because really just about everyone shown great public space will react to it very positively. And you see that with the way Canadians take holidays. Basically everywhere you go, when you describe the thing you really liked about your holiday, you're describing spending time in public spaces. Yeah. Plazas and beaches even, and all of it. You need places to gather. And, one of the sort of fundamentals of democracy, it's in the Bill of Rights, it's in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, is the right to peaceably assemble. And that's not just saying, you can have people over in your living room. That's saying there will be a space somewhere you can gather in it. And those spaces have to be public spaces. And what we have currently is a lot of sort of neglected public space. What you need is that sort of public space that's undefined and that really does belong to everyone, and that within whatever other legal boundaries there are on the society, you can do whatever you want. And that's really where all the sort of important conversations and interactions occur that create community and create kind of a more vibrant civil society. Particularly when you're under the age of 16, you have someone's going to drive you, or my teenage years I was in North Bay, Ontario, and spent a lot of time, feeling my legs and arms slowly freeze as I waited for the bus in like February to go see my friends, and then you think, well, wouldn't it be great if we all lived within a few blocks of each other, or there was somewhere to meet that was within a few blocks of here, or anything, right? Public space has been almost completely conquered by the automobile. Not in any sort of willful way. It's kind of a byproduct. Oh, we have all these cars. They're these large, sort of cumbersome things. We need places for them to go from one to another. They need somewhere to park, etc., etc. And you kind of go the world over. What you find is, well, there's, we had this street, we had this plaza, whatever else, but then, the car sort of took it over, and now it's a roundabout, or now it's a parking lot. Yeah, there's sort of signal examples. Copenhagen in Denmark is one of the great ones, which was one of the first big pedestrianization movements in Europe after World War II, where you had these old medieval downtowns. You didn't need many cars for them to become completely clogged. And in Copenhagen's case, they were looking at, banning bikes. The sidewalks had gotten, there were these just incredible, you see pictures from the 1950s, and everyone's crowded onto this strip that was basically as wide as a single person, and you had to kind of jostle for space. And starting in 1962, Copenhagen said, no, let's make the downtown for people. And it was a huge success, so much so that, it's been copied far and wide now. Everywhere, Melbourne, Australia has done some amazing stuff. New York City, actually the, pedestrianization of Times Square and all the rest of it was based on, kind of copying the Copenhagen model. But you see that even in Calgary with some of the smaller experiments, but that are becoming more and more robust. So the occasional use of the back alleys, like the Grand Theatre did for having a party in the back alley. That's the plan is to have that become a broader program starting this summer. Even just the way there's been like this reinvestment here in Calgary along the riverfront. People want to be near water. Like there's kind of innate desire to be close to it. And so we've got this new Riverwalk in Calgary and the new pedestrian bridge, the Peace Bridge, and are really, I think, reinvesting in the idea that the river is a great place to be in and be near. And the individual or small scale sort of bottom-up community groups can do amazing things, actually, to create and enhance public space, because the space is sitting there latent, even in the most kind of, sprawling of suburbs. There were chunks of land that were set aside that were supposed to be sort of public space, but they're usually placed in places that aren't terribly convenient. But you can liberate those spaces too. You can figure out ways to use them. So I know some folks who are doing this in their neighborhood here in Calgary, just saying, on Monday nights at 7 o'clock, put the word out to the whole community through the Community Association newsletter. That's the Monday night where everyone comes outside. Like, so you just step out on your front porch and see who's around. And you don't need any kind of, elaborately built thing. You don't need a public plaza. If you get enough people out, they'll just sort of you'll use the sidewalk. You'll even just take over a chunk of the road. One of the more ambitious things that I talk about was this thing in suburban Dallas where they had like sort of an old retail strip that had died, and it was basically just cars moving through it at 70 kilometers an hour, and a couple of shops along the way decided we're going to have a street festival, and part of the street festival will be an art installation where we build a sort of complete street. And so they widened the sidewalks and put in street trees and painted their own bike lanes and that kind of thing, just for a weekend. But even just in that weekend, so clearly demonstrated to the community that this was something missing that was really good, that it had a follow-on effect, and that was a handful of people. I think the total budget was not even $1,000, donated materials, and they built a fantastic, vibrant streetscape in a weekend. So it's not complicated. First step is as it is for any sort of action, I would say on this sort of climate and energy crisis emerging, which is that you just look at what tools do you have accessible to you in your community, what looks feasible to do in the near term in your community, and then who else is find allies and begin. And it doesn't have to take on like in this case, you don't need City Hall to give sanction to better public space or raise parking rates, or what. You could simply start with in my community, who is engaged in this stuff. How do I begin to talk to them, and what can we figure out to do right here, right now that works? And I don't think there's a tool. I think there's a toolkit, but there's not one model that you build out of that. It's going to be a very different answer for every community. But the thing that's been certainly very powerful in my work, not just the writing I've done, but after having written about a more hopeful and optimistic way of thinking about this stuff, coming back to my community in Calgary and doing exactly that, finding a couple organizations that were engaged in this, working together with them, and finding a way to sort of change the conversation a little bit, and we began with a sort of one-day conference, and that turned into a little bit of a campaign to get some smarter planning stuff happening at City Hall. One of the people who got involved very early in that, with this thing that we wound up calling Civic Camp, was Naheed Nenshi, who of course is now the mayor of the city. So really we've seen pretty rapid transition from, is there anything we can do, to yes, in fact we can get much smarter government in our city. But even if that's not your aim, I think there's tools available. There are people engaged in this issue pretty much everywhere, and just decide what what seems feasible and fun to do, and do it. Talk to leaders at another level of government. Build something at the grassroots level. Don't spend all your time and energy being frustrated at a bunch of people who don't want to listen. So you create great public space, which creates the room to have further conversation and to further explore what a city can be. And all that's a really positive way to begin the process of change.